Welcome to Crossroads. The CDC is now investigating possible problems from the COVID-19 vaccines. And this will include a review of potential safety issues, whether or not they're effective, and also whether or not they have the effect of creating immunity, the purpose of a vaccine. Also, a key piece of the whole light on crime policies, it could be coming to an end very soon. President Donald Trump signed an executive order that will work as a first step, not done yet, to end cashless bail. And also in other news, several officials are now under criminal investigation for mortgage fraud. Quite a lot of them, in fact. And some critics are framing this as a type of political retaliation, saying Trump is going after his enemies for the same thing they used to go after him. We'll be discussing these topics and a lot more today, so don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. You get updates on when the next episode is, and you also help us in the algorithm. It's a win-win. Now, look, first off, let's talk about the investigations into the COVID shots. Epoch Times said this: a group that advises the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is going to review various aspects of the COVID-19 vaccines, including concerns about the persistence of messenger ribonucleic acid, mRNA. According to a new document, mRNA is now under investigation. It says the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, work group on COVID-19 vaccines will review data on the shots related to their safety, effectiveness, and immunogenicity, according to the AUG. It notes that 20 documents, which was released by the CDC. It notes that members also plan to look at gaps in existing knowledge, quote, relating to biodistribution, pharmacokinetics, and persistence of the spike protein, mRNA, and lipid nanoparticles to inform immunization recommendations, the document states. It also notes that studies have found the spike protein and mRNA in the vaccines persist for some time. And there's questions over, is that a good thing or bad thing? It notes as well, lipid nanoparticles are used to deliver the mRNA. And other areas of focus for the group include potential impurities, such as contamination by DNA, the impact of repeated booster doses on immune systems, meaning, they advise you to keep getting the boosters. Is that damaging your immune system, or is it good for it? And notes as well how both COVID-19 vaccines and COVID-19 have affected all-cause deaths and hospitalizations. In other words, an investigation into, is COVID-19 causing these problems? Is it the vaccines? Is it something else? They're going to actually look into it finally. And it also says, as well as serious adverse events potentially caused by the vaccines. Now, on these points, the problem is the vaccine effects, let's say, they've been mixed into the effects of COVID-19 itself. And it's not quite clear on whether COVID-19 was, causing upwards of 1 million deaths and other complications, or was it people getting vaccinated? We don't really know. Also, because of the way the reporting was happening, if a guy gets in a car accident, they call it a COVID death. Was that vaccines? Was it COVID? Was it a natural cause? Again, we don't really have answers to any of these yet. And so right now what they're doing is they're looking into this finally, and hopefully we'll get some answers. On that point as well, within the Trump administration, many key figures around him, a lot of them are very critical of the COVID-19 vaccines. Again, RFK Jr. has been very critical of them, as have Robert Malone, who's, of course, part of the board now. And so we will see these investigations as they move forward and hopefully finally get some answers on this. Now, also in other news, a key piece of the light on crime policies could be coming to an end. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that will work as a very first step to bringing an end nationwide to cashless bail. This is the official White House executive order. It says maintaining order in public safety requires incarcerating individuals whose pending criminal charges or criminal history demonstrate a clear ongoing risk to society. Meaning, of course, under normal circumstances, if you're an insane person beating people on the streets and screaming at the sky, and you get arrested for beating people up, they might put you in jail. and they put you on bail, right? You can't just get out. The reason they do that is because they're worried you're going to go and harm somebody else while you await your trial. The big problem America has had is that they kind of got rid of that in a lot of states, not nationwide, but state by state. New York City has had a big problem with this, as has California. And so what often happens because of cashless bail and things like this, you have people who get arrested, they should be in jail, they're let out, and they go and harm somebody else, stab somebody, push somebody on the subway tracks, things like this. And there's a lot of deaths, a lot of crimes that could have been prevented had they not had this. The big question is, well, is bail just a benefit for rich people? Is it the get out of jail free card for rich people while they await trial? That's kind of the big argument with it. But Trump is suggesting that no, it's in place to protect other people. If you're deemed to be a threat, a danger to others, the reason the judge will set your bail very high oftentimes is to try to prevent you from getting back on the streets. The White House notes this. It says, when these individuals are released without bail under city or state policies, they are permitted, even encouraged, to further endanger law-abiding, hardworking Americans because they know our laws will not be enforced. The other big point he's making here is that also the reason punishment exists is often as a deterrent. You could argue that some people, the deterrence is internal. You just don't want to hurt other people. But criminals, people who don't have that deterrence, obviously the basis of why they do what they do, they're not going to get stopped by any kind of internal restraints. They need something outside. And that's the reason punishment exists for crimes. That and, of course, justice for the victims. They're suggesting that if you remove the punishment, the people who have no problem committing crimes might just keep doing it. The White House says our great law enforcement officers risk their lives to arrest potentially violent criminals only to be forced to arrest the same individuals, sometimes for the same crimes, while they await trial on the previous charges. And it notes as well, this is a waste of public resources and a threat to public safety. As President Trump says, I will require common sense policies that protect Americans' safety and well-being by incarcerating individuals who are known threats. It is therefore the policy of my administration that federal policies and resources should not be used to support jurisdictions with cashless bail policies to the maximum extent permitted by law. So what's happening here? Trump is not getting rid of cashless bail. But in the United States, it is the issue that many states rely on federal government money. And if you're a state that wants to have cashless bail, you're not going to get that federal money. That's, of course, New York City, that's California, that's a lot of them. And I do know from talking to police officers, it's a problem. I know that when people talk about crime, they often point to like certain demographics and so on. It's not quite like that. The reality is police often deal with repeat offenders. You do have, of course, random crimes committed across the board all the time. But a lot of crime, it's the same exact people. Like, I don't mean group of people, I mean the actual person. It's just people who just violate the crime a lot. I know, for example, in parts of California, officers I've talked to, they say about 70% of crime is committed by the homeless population. They refer to certain individuals as quote-unquote clients. And on a regular basis, the police will just keep arresting the same person over and over and over again. And when you keep letting these people out over and over and over again, that is the cause of repeat crimes. And of course, it's very discouraging for police officers because they know these people are they know that they're a danger. Officers oftentimes know, okay, they know this guy by name. He's constantly causing problems in the community. People are always calling the police on him. Hey, he's in my backyard. Hey, he's threatening my family. Hey, he just robbed my store. Police go there. They see him like, oh, again. They arrest him, and while they're still filling out the paperwork, they see the guy walking outside because of the revolving door because of no cash bail. And it's very discouraging for officers. It's very discouraging for the community. And the big concern, even aside from just the hassle of it, The big concern they have is that those people often go on to commit a really serious crime. They rape somebody, they murder somebody, they do something horrible, and they know it could have been prevented. And so that is a big problem for officers. The other big thing is a lot of money gets spent. You know, you could argue the incarceration costs a lot of money. A lot of money gets spent just wrangling a handful of people. The police officers basically have to babysit certain people as they bounce around in the public mental asylum, which becomes your community. And, you know, their full-time job basically is babysitting a handful of people who are known problems. And, you know, the idea, again, of bail and holding people is to prevent that kind of situation from happening. And that also frees police up to investigate things, to actually look into really serious crimes, organized crime and all that, rather than have to deal with, you know, the guy they know by name who's a regular client, let's say. Now, also on the point of executive orders, though, Donald Trump signed another order that yet again makes it illegal to burn or desecrate the American flag, and this could actually have a lot of different implications. I'll be talking more about this after a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back to Crossroads, a show by the Epoch Times, one of America's largest independent newspapers. Support us and independent journalism by hitting that like button, leave a comment below, and thank you so much for watching. Now look, President Donald Trump has signed another executive order, and this one makes it illegal to burn or desecrate the American flag. And this is going to have a lot of implications, I'll explain. But first, this is what the White House says. It says, our great American flag is the most sacred and cherished symbol of the United States of America and of American freedom, identity, and strength. Over nearly 2.5 centuries, many thousands of American patriots have fought, bled, and died to keep the stars and stripes waving proudly. The American flag is a special symbol in our national life that should unite and represent all Americans of every background and walk of life. Desecrating it is uniquely offensive and provocative. It is a statement of contempt, hostility, and violence against our nation, the clearest possible expression of opposition to the political union that preserves our rights, liberty, and security. And it says, burning this representation of America may incite violence and riot. And this is the grounds on which they're making it illegal now, right? The idea that burning the flag is inciting violence and riot. That's the nature of the argument here. It adds as well, American flag burning is also used by groups of foreign nationals as a calculated act to intimidate and threaten violence against Americans because of their nationality and place of birth. And so again, if a foreign national burns the American flag, it's being formed as intimidation and a threat of violence against Americans. So there you have the the legal foundation for this. I saw some of you in the chat questioning, well, you know, the Supreme Court has determined twice now that burning the American flag itself is not illegal. And, you know, of course, you can face serious crimes for burning other flags. If you do a burnout in your car on a trans flag painted on the sidewalk, you can face like 10 years in prison. There were people, by the way, who faced many years in prison. Some were facing charges of up to 10 years. There is also the issue, if you burn the Israeli flag, a court has now determined that it's linked to the identity of the Jewish people. If you burn their flag, it's seen as an act of violence against the Jewish people and a hate crime. So you cannot burn those without facing really serious criminal charges. But what's important is this, and you can burn the American flag and not face anything as of now. What's important is this, though, and this is the nature of what Trump is invoking here. The reason why it's now deemed illegal, and they're trying to change it on the trans flag, you can't burn that, is because it's seen as an incitement of violence and riot against an identity group. It's seen as an act of hate. It's a hate crime against an identity group, meaning the burning of the flag is not the crime. The intent of a threat or as a type of intimidation against the people it represents is what the crime is. And so the crime, in other words, is not the burning of the flag. The crime is intimidation. The threat is threat of violence. The crime is inciting riot. Same thing with if you burn the Israeli flag. Burning of the flag is not technically the crime. The crime is hate crime, it's intimidation, it's representing a type of threat against an identity group. That's the same interpretation Trump is invoking for this. And this is it's probably going to be challenged, but they can use this now and say, well, you deemed it to be a crime to burn these flags because it represents intimidation, hate, and threat. Should that not be applied to the American flag? Why can you not burn these, but you can burn this one when it represents people's identity as well? Trump adds this. He says, my administration will act to restore respect and sanctity to the American flag and prosecute those who incite violence, right? Incite violence or otherwise violate our laws while desecrating this symbol of our country to the fullest extent permissible under any available authority. And also on this note, while signing the executive order, Trump noted the penalty of burning the American flag will be 1 year in jail. Watch.
What the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement is
incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record. And you will see flag burning stopping immediately, just like when I signed the Statute and Monument Act. 10 years in jail if you hurt any of our beautiful monuments. Everybody left town. They were gone. Never had a problem after that. It's pretty amazing. We stopped it. But this is something that's, I don't know, in a certain way, it's equally as important. Some people say.
So my interpretation of what Trump is doing here, if you want to go by actual color codes and the actual rules around what it means to respect or disrespect the American flag, if you wear American flag socks or an American flag t-shirt, that's actually seen, if you want to go by the technicality of a violation of color code, you're not supposed to do it. A lot of patriotic Americans do that. Uncle Sam has the American flag hat and everything else, right? That's become kind of part of the culture of the United States. You could argue that is maybe not as far as a desecration, but a lack of respect for the American flag. Does that mean that everybody who has an American flag shirt is now going to be criminally charged and sent to prison for a year? Probably not, right? Also, the other question is, well, does that apply to all flags now? You can't burn the trans flag or the gay flag. You can't burn the Israeli flag. You can't burn the American flag. What about the Christian flag? What about the flags of other countries? What about the flags if you're a group of individuals and you create a flag to represent your identity? A lot of Americans now have been flying the Appeal to Heaven flag, which was used by the Founding Fathers, asking heaven for assistance facing the British tyranny. the white flag with the pine tree on it, right? That's the appeal to heaven flag. Would burning that represent a hate crime because you're going against those people? What about if you're a libertarian and you have the yellow "Don't Tread on Me" flag with the snake? If people burn that, is it a threat of violence against you? In other words, there's a question of to what extent this should be enforced. If it becomes part of the culture where every single symbol representing every single group can be deemed a crime if you desecrate it, do you want that? Is that the kind of society we want to live in? Maybe they'll roll it back. Maybe they'll say burning the American flag represents a crime, but maybe the Israeli flag and the trans flag and the rainbow flag are not. That's a big question I think the country is going to have to ask. If you want to protect certain groups, do you extend that protection to every group? And what are the implications of having such a broad law? Rolling it back to just the American, and yeah, some are asking about the Jen Reinbold joking, "Don't burn my satanic flag." I know you're joking, but there's actually been things like that. There was a satanic group that built a statue to Satan in one of the government buildings in one of the U.S. states. Somebody was offended by it, broke this satanic statue and was sued for a hate crime. You know what I mean? So it does get into the weeds a bit, but it is an important issue to raise. To what extent should desecrating a symbol represent an attack on that group itself? Is it a hate crime if you desecrate any symbol, even if you regard that symbol as offensive? Satanism is a great example. If you deface a satanic church monument, should you be charged with 10 years in prison, which is what you could face, by the way? Is that fair? And again, to what extent do you want that? Is it fair to only have certain groups protected? This group is protected, but this group is not. Again, you could argue that how many nations do we have on earth? And if you desecrate the Israeli flag, that's a crime, but none of the others are. Should we extend that protection to every single race on the face of the earth in every country? I don't know. That's a fair question to ask because the laws currently in place could be interpreted to expand in that way, which is the way that laws do tend to expand. Now, back to the point of Trump banning the burning of the American flag, to the point where I mentioned, you could say it's a color code violation if you wear like an American flag hat or T-shirt or socks. I don't think they're going to be interpreting it like that. The nature of what Trump is invoking here is the crime is not technically the burning of the flag. The crime is the implication of the burning of the flag. If you burn the flag as an incitement of violence, in other words, if you burn the flag during a protest and you're rioting, they will charge you and give you an additional criminal sentence using that as like an enhancement, that you desecrated the American flag as an incitement or a threat against the American people, and then went on to commit violence representing that threat to the American people. Very much like a hate crime enhancer would be to any normal crime. And also, if you're a foreign national, of course, we saw a lot of this happening, whether it's the pro-Palestine protesters or the anti-ICE or anti-deportation protesters. You have people waving the Mexican flag and they're burning the American flag. You have people waving the Palestinian flag and they're burning the American flag or putting it on the ground and stomping on it. If you're a foreign national doing that, they're also saying it could represent a threat against the American people. A threat and an act of violence even against the people of this country. And it's on that enhancer, not on the flag itself, but as the enhancer, the hate crime, that they're doing this, it seems, just in my interpretation of how they're doing this. Now, also in other news, several officials are now under criminal investigation for mortgage fraud. Like a lot of them. A lot of them are. Even Adam Schiff, for example, is being investigated for it. And there are a lot of people on the other side of the political aisle, mainly among Democrats, who are saying this is political retaliation by Donald Trump. Wall Street Journal says this. It says the Trump administration has a new weapon at its disposal in its efforts to take down Democrats and their appointees: mortgage records. In other words, the records demonstrating violations of law are now being used to bring criminal charges for violations of law. It says members of the administration have now alleged 3 public officials have committed mortgage fraud, referring each to the Justice Department. The administration has signaled that it has just gotten started. This is just the beginning, those 3 people. There's going to be a lot more, they're suggesting. It says U.S. Pardon Attorney Ed Martin was recently tapped to investigate fraud by public officials in mortgages, according to a letter Martin sent. Ed Martin, of course, formerly part of Phyllis Schlafly's Eagles. I have an award from them, for example. They do a lot of good stuff. But Ed Martin, of course, is now working as the U.S. Pardon Attorney in Washington. And he's now, as they say, investigating fraud by public officials in mortgages, suggesting that the exact role of this, the exact purpose of this, is not just general mortgage fraud, but violation of mortgage laws, specifically by elected officials, government officials. Now, again, we don't know if this is true or not. This is according to Wall Street Journal. But it says this: the targets have denied wrongdoing, but the probes represent an aggressive new spin on opposition research that has long dug into tax records and financial disclosures public office holders have to make. Mortgage applications go beyond the typical disclosure requirements. Another twist is the allegations are coming from a government official overseeing an agency able to access massive amounts of mortgage data. So what they're suggesting here is that mortgage data, you can't normally access all of it, but the mortgage data collects more information than you would normally have to grant for normal investigations. And it just so happens the individual being tapped for these investigations has the ability to access basically all of that data. Now, you might remember Donald Trump was accused of this, even criminally charged for it, even found guilty for it when he was out of office. Remember, he was accused of misvaluing Mar-a-Lago, which many people dug into the actual amounts and suggested the crime was ridiculous. They tried saying he was devaluing Mar-a-Lago, when in reality he was probably overvaluing it. Regardless, he was found guilty of it. He was charged with like dozens of felonies. That has now been overturned. They overturned that. People say Trump's a felon. He's no longer a felon. They overturned the charges. They won the appeal just recently. Trump is no longer a felon. Those charges are gone. But of course, it turns out one of the officials who brought those charges is now being accused of doing the very thing she accused Donald Trump of, and she's facing criminal investigation for it. Again, mortgage fraud. And they're also suggesting this seems to be a problem kind of across the board, where there's fraud relating to a person's spouse, maybe a person's husband or wife was doing something, and maybe there was a mixture in how they labeled who owned what. Maybe they're devaluing properties for tax reasons. Maybe they're mislabeling whether a place is occupied or unoccupied for tax reasons. They're finding a lot of these issues. As of right now, there are 3 government officials being criminally investigated for this. All 3 say they're innocent, they're denying this, and they're saying this is political retaliation. The Trump administration is saying, well, say what you will. Tell it to the judge, basically. And they're going to be moving forward with many more investigations like this, because it seems to be the case they suspect this may be a broader trend for some reason, among elected officials, that many of them are or could be committing mortgage fraud. But again, the other question is it only Democrats who are facing these charges? Are they going to go after Republicans as well? Look, call me naive. I would assume that I'd assume it's not a Republican-Democrat thing if there's problems, right? And so there is a question, if you're only going after people on one side of the political aisle, is that political retaliation? You tell me. Many on the Republican side would also argue, though, that, look, over the Biden administration, it was the opposite. It was Republicans and every person Trump was connected with basically being investigated, and they were bringing out charges on everything. Even going into RICO charges where people connected to things who weren't even involved with it but were being criminally charged. And so, I don't know, you tell me, is this justice? Is this politicized justice? Is this just investigating the investigators? Again, everybody has their own opinions on this. I'm not here to tell you who's right and who's wrong in it, but it is moving forward right now. Now, look, also on another topic, after an illegal alien killed 3 Americans while pulling an illegal U-turn on a highway while driving a semi, blocking the entire highway, and a vehicle just smashed into the back end of it, killing all 3 of them. And then, of course, the illegal immigrant was shown on camera looking irritated that he was being filmed, but otherwise not looking very emotional. There's now a very large campaign all across the nation to revoke commercial driver's licenses, the CDLs, from illegal aliens, and also to check whether or not they can speak English properly. Importantly, when they investigated the illegal alien now being accused of causing the deaths of 3 Americans, right, in that car accident, it was found that he had illegally, aside from illegally entering the country or staying here, he came in legally and violated his visa. He overstayed. He then illegally got a CDL, commercial driver's license, in Washington State and in California. Based on their own laws, they were not allowed to give it to him. They gave it to him anyway. He then failed an English proficiency test in New Mexico. 3 different barriers that were crossed, 3 different incidents which should have made him ineligible to drive that truck, but he was allowed to for some reason and went on to cause the deaths, at least being accused, of 3 people. Those people would probably be alive were it not for that. It was also found that when he was shown even traffic signs, even aside from not being able to really speak English, he could only recognize 1 out of 4 traffic signs. He was driving a commercial truck and he could not recognize most traffic signs. I would assume that most normal drivers can recognize traffic signs. But now what's happening, Attorney General in Florida, they're calling on the Trump administration to investigate the entire CDL program, especially in California and Washington, for granting the licenses to illegal aliens. Watch this.
I'll conclude by saying that our office is calling on the federal government, the United States Department of Transportation, to revoke CDL programs in California and Washington. If the federal government identifies systematic abuse of these programs and allowing illegal aliens, perhaps even encouraging illegal aliens to obtain these licenses. And if other states like New Jersey and others are engaging in similar practice, then those programs should be revoked as well, and any funding tied to it should also be revoked. Thank God we've got a president that is restoring law and order, that has secured the border, and that has brought back American sovereignty. This is saving lives, this is protecting our people, and going forward, we're going to help him deliver on his promises. Here in Florida, we're leading the way. We're going to continue to interdict as many people as possible. I know several hundred illegal aliens were detained last week in state law enforcement efforts. And we'll continue to get them to Alligator Alcatraz or other places, and we will combat in court activist judges that want to shut down these facilities.
Now, on a related point also, the state of Florida is now moving forward and starting to do illegal alien checks at truck weighing stations. And they're not only looking for illegal immigrants driving commercial trucks, they're also looking into whether they have English proficiency. So in Florida, as of right now, they're moving forward to have these checks. Can you properly speak English? Are you an illegal alien driving a commercial vehicle? If either of those is the case, I don't know, they're probably going to arrest you and probably take away your CDL and then carry out further investigations with it. Like, which state gave you that license? We will see. They're also talking about doing that across the board right now, not just in Florida, but across the entire nation. But Florida is moving on it before others. Now, meanwhile, something kind of freaky. Scientists are now looking into what are known as mirror organisms. And a researcher is warning this could have devastating effects basically on the entire world and all populations. The Financial Times notes this. This is an opinion piece from John Glass, who's one of these researchers. He says this. He says, "This year, I witnessed something I never expected to see in my scientific career. More than 150 scientists, policymakers, science funders, and ethicists came together at an Institut Pasteur in Paris seeking to prevent a global threat that does not yet exist, but could." It says this. He says, within the next few decades, scientists will probably be able to build mirror life. And what it says is these are organisms built from molecular components that are mirror images of the versions used in nature. Flipped backwards, upside down. It says mirror life represents a profound break from this work. It would be created using entirely different building blocks, not the same molecules that are found in all known life. The organism's DNA would twist to the left, whereas ours twists to the right. Their ribonucleic acids, essential to biological functions, would loop and bulge in the opposite direction. In other words, if you've ever seen, DNA and there's that little spiral thing, they could essentially, because, they can genetically alter organisms now. They can create genetically altered organisms. They can have an organism where, our DNA is one way. They could create one basically the same, but it spins the other way. And these would be entirely new organisms, not based on doing something really novel, but just inverting normal life. And they're warning what this would mean. They say if this is achieved and Pandora's box opens, it could pose extraordinary risks. Mirror bacteria could evade our immune system, confound our medicines, and escape many of nature's checks and balances. What the scientist is noting here, when we talk about mirror life and genetically modified organisms, most of us would be thinking, okay, maybe they'll create an animal, a genetically modified animal that's a mirror image of a cat or a dog or, a horse or something like that. And that's what they're doing. Or maybe they do it to humans would be a bit of a step, but maybe they could do it to a human if they don't have the proper checks and balances in place. What this scientist is warning of is bacteria. What if they created a mirror organism of a bacteria? What would that do? He says this, to the best of our knowledge, our immune systems produce very weak antibody responses against mirror molecules, if any. Having even one immune deficiency can cause a patient to die of overwhelming bacterial infections. A mirror bacterial infection might be like having many immune deficiencies at once. And because, in other words, immunodeficiency is defined as, your body is incapable of fighting against viruses or bacteria or other things. If you have, AIDS, right, HIV, it means your body is not properly able to defend against these things. And what they're suggesting is a mirror image of these things, even though it would represent the same thing that you might otherwise be immune to, because it's basically inverted, it would be a foreign body to your system, and your body wouldn't know how to respond to it. And so they're suggesting that if you create these things, it would just have free reign, effectively. They say predators, including viruses and amoeba, control bacterial populations. Mirror bacteria would be resistant to many of these predators. With fewer constraints, they could spread across ecosystems, disrupt food chains, and cause fatal infections across species, destroying not just humans, but also probably animals, maybe even entire ecosystems. It says contaminated areas could become irreversibly uninhabitable, compromising our agriculture and natural world. Huge numbers of people, animals, and plants could be wiped out, with some driven to extinction. massive warning over mirror creatures, which again science is seeing as a valid area of research now, and the possible devastating effects that could come about if they dare to begin researching that. But hey, when have we ever heard of a virus escaping a lab, right? Probably okay. Now look, on another topic, a political contradiction is finally facing its own inherent contradictions. People have been asking, when is this going to happen? I'll tell you right now, it's finally happening. The pro-Palestine and Middle East activist organizations are starting to realize they don't get along with the gay pride homosexual movement. A pro-Palestine protest group actually canceled a pride parade in Canada. CBC says this: Ottawa's annual pride parade was canceled on Sunday after it was halted by a local pro-Palestinian advocacy group that blocked the road and then demanded to negotiate with organizers. And it seems negotiations failed because the pro-Palestinian group managed to cancel the entire parade. May the most oppressed group win, apparently, because the most oppressed group gets the most benefits. And apparently the pro-Palestinians are more oppressed than the pride individuals. It says the group Queers for Palestine, Ottawa, it says Q4P, halted the parade with the permission of the Grand Marshal. It says the organization said this in a press release issued Sunday afternoon just as the parade was stopped. Further in, it says this: apparently they have a long-going feud between these different groups. It says in 2024, Capital Pride, which is the one that they stopped from having their parade, issued a letter which condemned both the acts of terrorism committed on October 7th and Israel's, quote, endless and brutal campaign in Gaza, which it said had caused the deaths of innocent Palestinians. And as the Jewish Federation of Ottawa called the statement anti-Semitic and said it would boycott the Pride Parade in response. And then it says other groups and individuals withdrew their support and sponsorship from some Pride Month events, including this individual. So in other words, because the Pride Parade organization condemned the Hamas terrorists for launching the October 7th attack, but also criticized Israel for its retaliatory actions in Gaza, they basically got both sides angry at them. The Jewish side is saying they're anti-Semitic for suggesting that Israel is wrong for its actions in Gaza. The pro-Palestine group says that the Pride organization is wrong for suggesting the Hamas terrorist attack was wrong. And so both sides are mad at them, and none of them are getting along with each other right now, to the extent that they're actually canceling each other's parades. They're raining on each other's parades, in other words. Interestingly also, though, just on the broader issue, you're seeing the same thing in Europe right now, where very conservative Muslim groups are actually canceling some of the pride parades because they say it violates, their moral standards for their religion. Ironically, a lot of other religious groups in the United States and elsewhere would love to do that, but they have not been able to because they get called haters and everything else. But because of the way the social ladder of who is the most persecuted, or who is lowest on the ladder actually gets the most benefits, we're kind of seeing where the dominoes fall, I guess you could say. And so apparently the migrant groups are above the pride group, or say below the pride groups on the persecution scale, so they're allowed to cancel them in those places. The very weird interaction of these different groups, right? Anyways, you can sit back and watch the show as the left cancels the left in this case, because it's very interesting to watch. That said, anybody wants to talk about anything, questions, comments, any topic you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. First off, let's see here. Science Chick 72. You're saying true free speech isn't just for the speech you like. That's how it works. Yeah, and that's the problem, right? everybody likes to say they support free speech. When, you know that book, was it Fahrenheit 76 or something? I never actually read it. When people talk about the Nazis burning books and the violation of free speech, everybody likes to say, I would absolutely stand against that. I believe in free speech. If you're holding a protest and somebody tries to stop you, everybody's going to say, how dare you stop me? How dare you say I can't say what I want to say? But everybody also has something they don't like to hear somebody else say, right? I deal with it too, okay? Like, okay, for example, when I did my previous documentaries and got like attacked, I'm like, well, how dare you offend me for, you know, saying I can't say this or something like that? How dare you? Everybody gets offended by something, right? Everybody finds it offensive when somebody criticizes you. If somebody comes out and criticizes your religion especially, or criticizes your racial group, everybody's going to get offended, right? It's normal. If you're not offended by it, good on you. You've transcended basic human nature, and you've achieved the grand wish of the Stoics. Really good on you if you cannot be offended by anything. But I think for most of us, we're at the very least a little offended by some things, if not a lot of things. And so, you know, the true test with free speech, Fahrenheit 451, thank you, Michael Kolovsky. I never read that book, actually. I probably should. Because, you know, I've read most of the other, dystopian novels. The book, by the way, is about, you know, a group of police that effectively work as book burners. They burn books, right? Things they don't want to be said. There's always the question of to what extent you should allow for free speech. Because look, let me talk about myself. I'm a very patriotic American, right? Like I really am kind of pretty dang patriotic. When I see people waving foreign flags and burning the American flag and saying that we own this country and Americans shouldn't be here and they hate America, I get offended by it. Like, not super offended, but, you know, I do find it offensive. And, you know, my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you know, we should arrest those people. We should put them in prison or, you know, deport them or something. You know. Like, because that's my reaction, right? I sometimes have to kind of step back and I'm like, you know, maybe they're not illegal immigrants. They're not really committing a crime. Maybe they should be allowed to say that. I don't know. Like, you know, to what extent should we allow free speech? Because, you know, the problem you have is that when you allow somebody who is offended by something to silence the thing that offends them, look, there are people who are offended by what I just mentioned. There are probably people who are offended by what I'm saying right now, right? I mean, being real, my opinions are probably offensive to some people. When I criticize those people for offending me, they're probably offended by me also. And so, do I want them to be able to silence me? No, obviously. And so, should I tolerate them because I want them to also tolerate me? I kind of think so, right? When I step back and think about it logically, I kind of think so, and that is the sacrifice of freedom. If you want freedom, you have to be able to tolerate the things you don't like. It's not tolerance. Actually, I say it. It's not at risk of being censored if nobody's offended by it. Let's put it that way. Only offensive speech is at risk of being censored. And so, to what extent should we censor offensive speech? It's kind of all or nothing to an extent. And I mean, I know there's a bit of gray area too, because there are foreign countries that have like information operations that take advantage of this. That take advantage of this. The Chinese Communist Party launching like information operations, foreign countries intentionally trying to spread narratives. I'm super opposed to that. I don't think Chinese state media should be able to operate in the United States. I think that foreign propaganda against our country, something should be done against it. But we also saw the opposite way that went. When, for example, everything was called Russian disinformation and everybody who was giving any opinions on one side of the political aisle was being labeled a Russian propagandist. It turned out to be fake. But when you create an exception to the law on free speech, while it may protect against some forms of actual subversion, there are people who will use it as a tool to silence things that should not be silenced. And so, that's why it's so difficult, right? On the other side, Michael Kolovosky is saying, what if they're endorsing rape, Josh? Still good? Yeah, well, and that's the other side too. To the extent that if someone endorses a crime, I do think there should be, I do believe in some restrictions of speech. If you're threatening to kill somebody or rape somebody, I do think that should be taken seriously. If you're threatening somebody with a crime, if you're giving death threats to somebody's family, I think you have crossed the boundary of free speech. Threats of violence, I do believe, cross the boundary and should be criminal to an extent. The same thing with libel laws, defamation. If you're spreading false things about an individual, I think you should be held accountable for that. But I would note that's already illegal. In the interpretation of law, that's already kind of there. And so I do think that's where the boundary is. I also think it's overused. If a guy does a burnout in his car because someone painted a trans flag on the street, I don't think that should be interpreted as hate speech, right? Just my interpretation. And so there are over-interpretations of it. But what I'm getting at is I think it's a very delicate issue. I don't think it should be absolute, but I do think we should be very, very careful with the exceptions, is kind of where I'm coming from. And I would also add one more thing. Which is what tolerance is. These days, tolerance has become a politicized term. Hey, we believe in tolerance. Tolerance these days is misinterpreted as acceptance. If you're told you should tolerate another group's moral choices, maybe you're very conservative and they're very loose, let's say, and they tell you to be tolerant. Tolerating is not when you accept somebody else's values or viewpoints, which is more like when you're forcing your way of life on another person. There are many ways of life I do not approve of. There are many things I would not want for myself or for my family. But it doesn't mean I hate those people, right? Because I tolerate them. I tolerate values that are different from mine. I don't agree with them. I don't accept them. I don't think they're good. But I don't hate the people who are doing it because I tolerate them. Tolerance is a valuable part of society. Tolerance, flying squirrel, great point. Tolerance equals freedom. If you lack tolerance, you're going to be offended by everything. If you lack tolerance, you're going to try to make a stink about every single thing that offends you. If you lack tolerance, the guy who cuts you off on the freeway and gives you the finger in the rear view mirror is going to bother you for years. If you have tolerance, it slides right off you. If you have tolerance, you're not offended by everything. Maybe a little bit in the moment, but you get over it. If you have tolerance, you can live next door to your neighbor with radically different morals than you, and you can still be friends. And you can crack a beer on the weekend or something like that and not get super offended by it. I think what we need as a society is a revival of true tolerance. Not politicized tolerance, but true tolerance, where we stop being so dang bothered by everything. It's not the end of the world if somebody calls you a mean name. And I think the revival of tolerance will resolve many of these problems. Another question, Ashley from California. You're saying cashless bail does nothing but remove the punishment of crimes. it literally removes the punishing effect. It should be surpassing. It shouldn't be surpassing crime has not gone down. Yeah, so that is one of the issues too, right? When you have an official come out and be like, what are you talking about? There's a lot of crime in my district. Let me show you the big chart. And the chart shows crime go like this, like a vertical spike, and then it goes like this. And like, see, look here, crime has gone down. You're like, no, it hasn't. People are calling all the time saying crime has gotten out of hand. Stores are being robbed. You have little like moped gang members robbing people at gunpoint. You have people walking into your local store, taking everything they want, shoving it in a bag, walking out the door. Nobody can do anything about it. Crime is pretty dang bad. You have kids stealing cars, taking over entire like intersections, doing burnouts in circles, setting fireworks off, throwing up at police. Yeah, you know, last I checked, it didn't look too harmonious, and it looks like there's a little bit of crime, okay? It looks like you have a crime problem. You're like, no, look at these statistics. The problem with statistics. Okay, all right, look. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody can hear it, did it actually happen? Does it make a sound? What is the sound of one hand clapping? And on the same note, if you don't call a crime, is it still a crime? That is the one hand clapping of modern crime statistics, folks. Because the way it works is this. They don't label crimes as crime, okay? Like, if you don't call, you know, theft under $900 a felony, and you say that felony crime has gone down, has it gone down, or did you just call it something else? If you don't go after people stealing people's cars and going on joyrides and selling it crime, is it still crime? If you legalized drugs or decriminalized drugs, and that used to be the bulk of crime, and you no longer go after that, and crime goes down because you legalized what used to be a crime, is that still crime? And to that point, if you legalized one of the largest crimes, and so obviously that causes a drop in crime, but it didn't drop by that much because people are committing a lot more other crimes, did you actually reduce crime or did you cause more crime? That is the problem of crime statistics, okay? And to Ashley from California's point, yeah, I agree. If you remove the punishment of crime, you're not disincentivizing crime. You're just removing the punishment for something. And obviously, again, there's two forms of restraint in society. There's external restraint and there's internal restraint. Internal restraint comes from a person's moral standards, it comes from their upbringing, and it comes from their religion. I'd assume most of you here, myself included, even if certain crimes were legal, I still might not do them because I don't morally agree with them. I'd feel bad. I'm not going to go rob somebody at knife point because I would have moral regret if I did it. I would feel like a bad person, and I don't want to hurt another person. There are people who are professional criminals who do not feel what I feel when they do that, right? They might feel excited. They might feel happy with themselves. They might feel they're tough. They might feel that they have a certain image that they like if they do it. They might just want the money, right? And so there are people who do that and they don't feel moral regret because they don't have that. And so the only thing that restrains those people is external restraint, the threat of punishment. If you remove the threat of punishment, you've removed the only thing that would restrain them because internal restraint has already failed for them. And so, yeah, you're going to have problems. Yeah, Flying Square is saying sociopaths, basically, right? And is that, and you could argue that's first off not fair to anybody. It's not good for them, but it's especially not fair to the people they will victimize. Legalizing crime is not just being light on the criminals. Legalizing crime is allowing people to be victimized. And I don't think that's fair to anybody, in my opinion. Jesus Freak Forever, you're saying, I believe self-deportation is on the rise. They don't want to go to Uganda or anywhere else they don't know. Yes, that is the case. Okay, so update from the Department of Homeland Security. Does anybody remember the Maryland dad? The accused MS-13 gang member who was sent to El Salvador and was brought back to face criminal charges and then was offered to be sent to Costa Rica and is now being sent to Uganda. The Department of Homeland Security is now referring to him as Uganda Man, not Maryland Dad. His new name is Uganda Man. Look, that's not me saying it. That is the U.S. government. That's your troll in chief. That's how it is. Anyways, to your point, though, I also agree that I believe self-deportations are on the rise. I've actually seen reports on some of the numbers coming out. I don't think there's any way to fully know the numbers, because the only things I would assume that are being tracked are people who are downloading the CBP Home app and are, agreeing to be self-deported. People who just drive across the border saying sayonara, I'm taking this car with me, even though I owe like another 2 years of payments on it. See you later, suckers. Hasta la vista, baby. I guarantee there's a lot of those people too, but I do know on the basic numbers, I've seen upwards of 1 million people who have now self-deported. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of self-deportations. I do think it's going to become even more as they ramp up the government side of the deportation efforts. A lot of that's going to be with the building and expansion of deportation facilities, because again, the bottleneck for deportations, there's two of them. One of the bottlenecks is sanctuary city laws. Trump is now getting around that by deploying National Guard to accompany ICE agents in 19 states. So you're about to watch them have a lot more ability to go and arrest people and deport people. The other bottleneck was the beds and the capacity at deportation facilities. They're getting around that by building more facilities and expanding that. So you're about to watch a lot more deportations. And as that happens, word of mouth is going to get around among those communities. And I think you're going to have a lot of people choosing to self-deport, because if you self-deport, you get a free airplane ticket basically anywhere you want to go. They give you $1,000 and you might be able to come back. If you have a family here, if you have kids here, the incentive to want to come back if you are deported is a very good incentive. If you do not self-deport and they deport you, and you could play your cards and gamble and say, well, maybe they won't find me. It's going to be a very big game of national hide and seek. Can you hide long enough to where these things go away? Maybe, maybe not. But if they deport you, you risk being charged criminally, fined every single day that you violated the deportation order. As of right now, every illegal immigrant is given a deportation order, meaning you're going to have to pay them a lot of money. If you were given a deportation order 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you're going to have to pay that fine for every single day you were here. That's a lot of money. Every one of them now will have to pay a fine if you don't self-deport and they catch you. You also risk the forfeit of all of your assets. If you own a house here, if you own a car here, if you have a house full of stuff, they can seize that from you. They can take everything you own. And in addition to that, they can give you a criminal charge. You can face criminal charges, and you may never be able to come back to the United States ever. And if you have kids here or grandkids here or family members here, that's going to be detrimental. So you can choose between that or getting paid $1,000. And I know that's not like enough to like start a life somewhere else, but it's kind of better than the alternative. I do think as the threat increases and the grand game of hide and seek becomes a little more risky, you're going to have a lot more people choosing to leave of their own volition. And It's kind of a gamble right now. It's a race against the clock for these people because, if they catch you in the meantime, the punishment is very severe. All right, everyone, before we go, I have a new special report out. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check it out. I went and I investigated the grand question. What are the food colorants in our food? Are they actually harmful to us? Are they actually damaging to us? We've heard all kinds of crazy things, that these artificial food colors cause like neurological damage or cellular damage, that they're causing kids to have all kinds of like deficiencies and like psychological problems. What is the truth? What do the actual scientific reports say about the actual health impacts of these artificial food colorings? Why is it that they're allowed in our food? Why do other countries restrict them? What data are they looking at that our regulatory bodies are not? And why do these big, food companies allow it here, but they have alternative products for other countries? I answer all of these questions. I've looked into all of these. You can watch my new special feature on this, the first of many special features I'm now working on. You can find that ept.ms/banned dyes. You can also find the link to that in the description below. I will show you a trailer in just a minute, but in the meantime, thank you so much for being here, folks. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you. Despite being among the wealthiest countries on earth, despite our quality of life, Americans are among the least healthy people in the world. We've been told two very different narratives on the chemicals in our food.
This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days.
One of the issues at the forefront, artificial food colors. Certain food colorings, such as Red 40, which is present in widely consumed products, have been associated with behavioral issues in children, such as increased hyperactivity and symptoms consistent with ADHD. So with all these concerns, how are these dyes still allowed for use? What do we actually know about the effects of these artificial chemicals? Who are these qualified experts who generally recognize that these are okay for us to consume? Who has been making the assessment that these are generally recognized as safe? Something has led to a spike in health problems, and for some reason, it's impacting Americans much more than people in other countries. So what are we being exposed to that people in other countries are not?